weapons.
The Sierra Maestra swarms with Batista's troops, yet the rebels maintain the upper hand, having gained enormous support from the local population.
Batista's army was on the ropes, and it was to ʻtʃe that Fidel looked to take the war to the north.
After 18 months in the Sierras, it's time to expand the war to the other parts of Cuba. Che Guevara and his column marched 370 miles to Las Villas province, strategically positioned near Santa Clara, Cuba's fourth largest city, just 4 hours from Havana.
In late 1958 that he met Aleida March. She was a supporter of the July 26 movement.
Aleida had smuggled weapons and messages from the cities to ʻtʃe's camp. But on one such mission, her cover is blown.
She ended up staying in the mountains and joining ʻtʃe. And in the course of the coming weeks, as they left Escambray to do battle against Batista's army in the towns around Santa Clara, they became lovers.
Meanwhile, the guerrilla war intensifies. Fidel Castro and his rebel army, now of about 800 men, begin to move through Orient Province, while ʻtʃe attacks army garrisons using psychological guerrilla tactics to scare away the enemy.
Monday, at 1 in the morning, one rebel went and took one shot into the garrison and got, of course, this massive firepower response. And went home or went to sleep or went to do something else. The next night, a couple of rebels, one at 11 o'clock and one at 4 in the morning, did the same thing, one shot. By the third night, that garrison was always up and not sleeping. They basically made these people just want to leave. And sure, after about 2 weeks, that garrison just abandoned camp and went into town. You're in a situation where you're thinking you're fighting a superior enemy. That morale-wise, that cannot be very good. I think that definitely affected the Batista army.
On December 27, 1958, Fidel Castro orders ʻtʃe to assault Santa Clara, Batista's last holdout, with 340 fighters against an enemy force 10 times the size.
The troops were drilled. They knew what they were doing. They knew they had a good commander. They had ʻtʃe was top of the line. They trusted him. We had been monitoring shortwave, Radio Rebelde, and from Santa Clara, from where ʻtʃe was. And the news didn't sound good. The rebel transmission was that they're getting clobbered.
But the reports are mistaken.
They're fighting against an army which is larger, but the people that get conscripted into the army are really very, very poor people. They have no stake in Batista staying in power.
Realizing the futility of resistance, they surrendered, and more than 100 guns passed over to the side of freedom.
The final blow to Batista's forces come when ʻtʃe and his men ambush an armored train, bringing reinforcements to Santa Clara.
On December 31st, 1958, Batista fled Havana with his entourage and several millions of dollars in cash.
As news of Batista's departure spreads, troops begin to surrender.
Fidel ordered ʻtʃe to march on Havana from Santa Clara, while he himself made a more leisurely victory parade the length of the island.
32-year-old Fidel Castro and his rebel army arrive in Havana on January 8, 1959.
Today, all eyes, those of the powerful oppressors and those of the hopeful, are fixed on us.
ʻtʃe's dream is for a united socialist Latin America, a new world order that will not sit well with the United States. To attain it, ʻtʃe will spread revolution across the continent. But first, more blood will be shed. January 2nd, 1959, Havana, Cuba. After a 2-year hit-and-run war against the forces of Cuban President Fulgencio Batista, a guerrilla force led by Fidel Castro and Che Guevara has now gained control over Cuba. In Havana, it will be ʻtʃe's job to keep the new revolutionary government in power by targeting and purging any opposition. As Cuban President Fulgencio Batista flees in defeat, Fidel Castro and his rebel army make a triumphant entry into Havana.
We were received as liberators, celebrated. I mean, people ran out with bottles of rum. People went wild.
It was a marvelous experience. I think for the first time in my life, we were able to see the people of Cuba united, with one vision, one love, and that it was the most beautiful thing you can see in Cuban history.
After 2 years of living in the mountains, the rebels find the temptations of Havana hard to resist.
Che had to issue stricter orders on the behavior of his young men who, arriving in Havana for the first time, finding all of these beautiful young women, in essence throwing themselves at them. It was, as Aleda described it to me, something of an orgy taking place, particularly in the bushes below the great statue of Christ.
Che's wife Hilda had not seen him since the guerrilla campaign began 2 years earlier. She flies to Havana with their daughter, unaware that there is another woman in his life.
And immediately he told her that he was no longer in love with her and he wanted a divorce. Che was married to Aleda just a couple of months later in a small ceremony with Raúl Castro acting as one of his witnesses.
As Che puts his personal life in order, Fidel Castro begins to implement the first major changes in Cuba.
Well, in the beginning, most of the population was expecting a change. Castro, always he was in the mountains, he promised free election in 18 months.
There is not communism or Marxism in our ideas. We will not seize any land from anybody.
Yet on February 16th, just 2 months after the rebels' victory, Fidel Castro was sworn in as prime minister, and the elections never take place.
Then certain segments of the professional class and the elite and the middle class began to view Fidel Castro and his regime with suspicion.
There was a debate that started almost from the day Castro took power about whether he was a communist or not. And part of this debate focused on Che Guevara, who obviously did get on the radar screen pretty quickly of the CIA.
Fearing that an alliance with the known communists could jeopardize his position, Fidel Castro keeps Che at a distance.
He ordered Che to take over the La Cabaña fortress, which is an old colonial garrison overlooking Havana Harbor and the city.
That was where the war criminals were tried.
Che orders executions of those found guilty.
In essence, carrying on with what he had been doing in the war. Summary trials for torturers, for men accused of war crimes, and carrying out their firing squad executions in La Cabaña.
The American guerrilla Neil Macaulay had spent several months with the rebels and helped train the soldiers. He is approached by the commander of the firing squad on its first round of executions.
I said, look, this is a matter for Cubans. You guys do it. And he said, no, but look, they make a mess of it. We need somebody who's at least going to hit the mark. I was prevailed upon. I didn't mind. I mean, I'm glad to shoot these guys. And so I walked out there. I took command of the firing squad. I directed them against him. And I mean, this time, killed him. And then the next guy who came up, I took that one too.
Over the next 18 months, hundreds, some say thousands of people are executed by firing squad. The killings help cement Che's terrifying reputation.
Both of them, they are killers, they are murderers. Castro has killed thousands of people, and Che Guevara has killed thousands of people too. So Che was a devil.
Along with the guilty, some claim that many innocent men are also executed.
That's the reason why a lot of people hate him so much, because he caused so many families to grieve.
Were innocents killed? Possibly. I don't know of any particularly.
What this did, though, is it showed that Fidel meant business. Don't mess with the revolution. Cuba's a dangerous place.
As Che continues with the war tribunals, The same questions in the United States regarding the new regime are being asked across the globe by Soviet Premier Nikita Khrushchev.